You found us through fly fishing. You'll stay for our passion and the community. Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing podcast.
Yeah, but he doesn't get it. How come fly fishermen don't get it?
You only haul with the short power snap.
Look for where people walk and the insides of bends and hunt those.
The roof blew off and the interior walls got sucked out. And the trees are just coming up. And I mean, he's clearly not going to clear the trees.
It is not a fly fishing story. It's a story about me trying to understand my brother through fly fishing.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today.
We've been waiting for you. Follow our guests, follow us on Instagram, and share this episode and the love if you enjoy this podcast. And we are live in 3, 2, 1. How you doing, Robin?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for making some time today to talk about Labrador, one of the spots that is another one of those famous spots. I think we haven't talked much about it. We've heard a lot about it, but I haven't had a lot of guests on. So I think today we're going to break down that a little bit, understand what that's about, talk about your lodge. You guys have this great lodge. John Gierach has noted your lodge when he was on the show last time. But before we get there, take us into fly fishing and how'd you get into it? What was your first memory?
Okay, well, right before I do that, the name of the lodge is Three Rivers Lodge. The website is trophylabrador.com.
Perfect.
But we're called Three Rivers Lodge, and that's because there's three rivers that feed into the main river right where we put the main lodge, and hence the name Three Rivers Lodge. Anyway, yes, I've been a fly fisherman off and on my whole life. Like most people, high school and college and starting a family and a business pretty much took all my time away from fly fishing. Some people are fortunate enough to squeeze it in, but I wasn't. But when I was a kid, I did some fly fishing. I grew up in East Tennessee and North Georgia. And then I piled around mostly with my brother, Chris. I had two older brothers that one of them did some fishing and the other one did math computation. But anyway, so we got going there. I caught my first, well, I didn't catch it actually. I hooked my first brook trout on the mossy banks of Tellico Creek in East Tennessee with a wand of a maple stick that I cut, and a fly that the fella who was teaching me tied from a feather he pulled from his pillow.
Nice.
So that was my first trout. And I went on through that, and we did quite a bit of fishing all through my younger years. My dad used to take us up to Blue Ridge Lake, and we'd camp out and fish the lake, etc. And then, as I said, it pretty much all put it down through high school, college, and early family years. And I had a son in 1978, and my wife, unbeknownst to her, what she was getting me into, gave me a fly rod for my first Father's Day. And so the passion opened back up quickly and ferociously, and I got to it big time.
There you go. And when did you make the move from where down kind of that area up to into Canada?
Yeah, right when my son was born, I had to get a real job. At the time, I was an aspiring professional golfer who didn't have the game to make it. And my wife was a flight attendant, and when she got pregnant, she had to quit her job, and I had to get a real job. So we moved to Boston, where I had friends, to the Boston area. And we lived there for 37 years. And 10 years ago, when I retired, I bought a farm up in northern Vermont, where I live now. So.
Oh, wow. There you go.
Right. New England was my fly fishing base. I fished, mostly Maine and New Hampshire, a little bit in Vermont. And when things started getting crowded on the rivers, particularly back in like the early 90s, when we all know what happened, and fly fishing became very popular, we kept finding, my brother and I was my fishing buddy, we kept finding people in our favorite holes, and we would say, okay, we'll beat them. We'll get there at 4:00 in the morning. And we had at 4 a.m, and they had camped out overnight. So finally we said, hell with this, we're going to go somewhere wild. And we went to Alaska back in the mid-'80s, and we found there was just as many people on the river in Alaska as there was in Maine. So a couple of years after that, my brother said, hey, I hear there's big brook trout in Labrador, and there's nobody there. You want to go? And I said, hell yeah, brother, let's go. So we went to early 90s. We went to Labrador, and I've been there ever since.
Wow. That's it, man. That's a great story. And why do you, with Labrador versus Alaska, I'm not sure what Labrador is like now, but why do you think there isn't as many people in Labrador? Is it just the country thing sort of deal versus like, say, Alaska?
Yeah, first of all, it's not a part of the United States. It's in Canada. So Alaska being in the U.S. makes a lot of things easier. Just try and open a business in a country that you're not a citizen of, and you'll find out. But anyway, Alaska just been, the dream place to go, for so long. And so many lodges have been built up there. And then the float plains, I think 90% of all the de Havilland beavers in the world are in Alaska, something like that. And you go around the corner and, my brother and I went to a really well-known lodge there and we picked the outpost camp just so we'd make sure we didn't even have lodge members there. But, kind of every bend in the river we went around, there was a plane sitting there or another boat. And, but when you go to Labrador, there is nobody. It's, I think there's 37,000 people live in the entire, it's half of a province, right? Newfoundland and Labrador are the same province. Newfoundland is an island off the coast and Labrador is on the mainland. But there's like two cities. There's Churchill Falls and Lab City and Wabush, which is twin cities, little twin towns. And there's nobody anywhere else. There's, a few of the Aboriginal, the Innu and the Naskapi. You'll see them scattered around occasionally because they get out and do some hunting and fishing. But, it's all to yourself. And, in my lodge, and I think most all the other lodges there too, when you go out with your guide, we guide, 2 anglers per guide. And when you go out, that's all you see the whole day. I mean, you don't see anybody else unless you want to, as long as you got a diversity of fishing spots like we do. We fish over 100 miles of river and we have a float plane to fly the long legs to get there. So anyway, there's nobody there. It's hard to get there. It's like when people fly over, they say it's 50% water, but I think it's technically only 20% water, but it looks like 50% water. And what's not water is a lot of it's bogs and bald granite. And building roads in there is just nigh on impossible. So there are the places that had easy access that had iron ore are where the towns are now. Oh, and right. Again, around the iron mines, right?
Yeah. Yeah, gotcha. Wow. So
wilderness.
It's wilderness. Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's basically similar to Alaska or probably a lot of Canada. Right. It's hard to get up there, and you guys built this place. What was that like building the lodge, and why? Did you right away hop up there for a trip or two and realize, think, hey, this could be something, or how did the lodge come to be?
Yeah, well, I went to another lodge and got to know the manager and one of the guides there particularly well, who wound up being partners with me in a new lodge. And one day the manager called and said, "Hey, I'm going to open up a new lodge next summer. I want you and your brother and your friends to be our first guests." And I said, "Kenny, come on. You told me I was going to be a part of this. Remember, we talked about this over and over because I wanted to be like a timeshare partner." And he said, nah, we got all the financing, no problem. And I said, okay, well, I'll round them all up. And a couple of weeks later, he called back and said, "You still want to get on that lodge?" I guess the money wasn't quite as easy as he thought it was. With.
Right.
So anyway, I came in as a 1/3 owner and intended to do that, to come up a couple of weeks. And, I was a builder, so I designed the cabins and ordered the materials list and did all that kind of stuff and helped with the logistics. And, but, one of my other partners wasn't quite as invested as I was and made a lot of people angry, particularly the person that we were buying the lease from. And it kind of all fell apart a month before our first guests were to arrive. So I got more involved and kind of have been the managing partner ever since.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, and it sounds like you've been doing a great job because you're getting lots of good testimonials and recommendations. What do you feel like, makes a successful lodge? I mean, you've been doing it a while now. You got the spot for sure. I know it's not easy, right? The weather and everything, but what is it? How have you been successful?
It's I live in a little town in northern Vermont that's really a farm town. It's dairy farmers all around me. And when I first moved up here, one of the farmers walking down the road, I pulled over just to say hello and introduce myself. And he said, "Yeah, you bought a farm." I said, "Yeah, I bought a farm. I'm going to try to activate it." And he said, "Well, let me tell you something about farming. When you really got something down and it's going great and something happens really bad, you're a farmer." So that's kind of like it is being an outfitter.
Gotcha.
And there's so much that you cannot control, and you do your very best, and you hope and you pray, and you increase your odds, and manipulate. But there's just things that happen that are beyond your control, and that's what makes it the hardest to stay in business, to stay viable, and to continue to create a good product.
Right.
Right.
Yep. So it's not always easy, and we're going to get into some of the details of the lodge itself, but I'm interested in this because you built something really cool here. And through the rough times, like you've stayed there. What keeps you there? What keeps you like not folding in the shop when things get tough? COVID hits, right, 3 years ago, and all that stuff. Right.
Yeah, that was an adventure. I don't know what's kept me in it. I think what's kept me in it, I'm a good enough businessman to have got my kids through college and our family on vacation every year with my contracting business. But I'm not a good enough businessman to have planned an exit strategy when I got in the lodge. So what kept me in it really was I had no exit strategy, and life was changing. Life was changing a lot. It's kind of really difficult to explain the changes in people's idea about what a good life is, in terms of part of it being away from civilization for 3 months a year. Back when we started, everybody wanted to become a timeshare member. Everybody wanted to buy into it. They wanted a part of it. Let's open another lodge. And now it was really hard. In 2015, I decided I was going to start trying to find a way to move on, because I was about to retire, and I had retired, and I bought this farm, and I'm gone all summer. So it's, my son and I are growing organic apples for the hard cider business, and I'm gone all summer, and he needs help, and I wanted to be here. And so I started trying to figure out a way to get out, and it's just really hard to find people who want to commit to that kind of a life, and also that have, a little bit of money to buy it, because it's not a lot, but you got to have something.
Yeah, you got to have something, right?
Right. So, and it took, to be honest with you, this is probably going to air after it happens, but I'm closing this coming Thursday and selling the place. So it's taken me 8 years to find a good buyer.
Oh, wow. So you're actually selling the lodge.
Right. That's, nobody knows that but you and me and the buyers.
Yep. Gotcha. Wow.
I'm sorry. I forgot the attorneys. The attorneys all know it.
Yeah, the attorneys. So you're selling the lodge. So the lodge is still going to be there, just under a different ownership.
Correct. And I'm going to be involved with it for a nice changeover period.
Yeah, good. Oh, wow. Oh, this is exciting. I mean, this is a really cool story. So, and remind us again, when is the date when this will be, if people will know about it officially?
Well, as soon as the deal's done, because you don't know until, everything's signed. I'll be sending, I write a very few newsletters every year, and I send them out.
Yeah, those are good. I read some of those on your blog, or I think there may be some older ones, but those were great.
Yeah. And so I'll have the newsletter all ready to go, to let everybody know that there's going to be new owners, and they're fortunate, and they're from Newfoundland. So they're Canadians, Newfoundland citizens, and they're going to find it a lot easier. One of the main things is their taxes will be a lot lower.
Oh, right.
Than non-Canadian taxes. But anyway,
yeah,
it's a father and son team. The son is a guide and a businessman, and the father owns several businesses, and they're very, very warm and welcoming people. I think the big thing that I worry about is, you asked me earlier what it takes to be successful, and quite frankly, it's to create a culture that people feel at home like the moment they step off the float plane.
That's it.
And creating a culture and keeping the staff and all about it, the accommodations. And of course, one of the first things is always serve really good food. Never scrimp on the food. It's mostly, people walk in the dining lodge when they first get there, and they know they're part of a new family. And that's really a great credit to the folks who've spent so many years working with us and trying to make it. I mean, every one of my guides and the two ladies in the kitchen staff, feel like it's their business too. I mean, I can't even describe how wonderful they all are. And they have been through all the years. I mean, we've had some bad apples like everybody else. They don't last long. And, but it's a real credit to the staff and the culture we created there.
Amazing. Amazing. This is great. Well, it's good to hear you're able to kind of move on to the next adventure. And it sounds like you have some cool things going with your son and the farm and stuff. So, but let's talk about the lodge a little bit. I want to hear more about, why, like I said, John Gierach kind of recommended it when he was on here, and just obviously you have it in the domain of your site, Trophy Labrador, right? I mean, we're talking big brook trout. I guess we start there. Is that where this all starts, is these big giant brook trout?
Yes, we were also, and from the middle of August through September, we hunted caribou. It's a long story, and probably listeners who are fly fishermen aren't interested, but the caribou herd basically disappeared, and in 2008, there was no more hunting allowed for the George River caribou herd. It basically disappeared. We went from 750,000 animals down to almost nothing in a matter of about 5 or 10 years.
Wow. And they have still don't know like migrated on or died?
Yeah, they the few that were remaining migrated to the west and joined the Leaf River herd, which is over in western Quebec. They think, a lot of people say they ate themselves out of food, which is not true. Most biologists, there was, the things that they know was there was 95% calf mortality, and the females, the fertile females, were normally 75% carrying calves, only 25% were carrying calves.
So like a climate change or something like that,
That's exactly right. When the calves are born, the herd couldn't get far enough north to get out of the biting insects.
Right.
Because the biting insects are hatching earlier because the weather was warming, and the little calves can't take the biting insects. It drives them crazy, and they leave their moms and can't find their moms and fall off a cliff or predators or whatever.
Damn.
But here's the interesting thing. That two biologists who came to camp, and we talked for quite a while about it. The big thing is, did hunting impact the demise of the herd? And most people say, well, you just can't. There was 750,000 animals, and what do we kill? 5,000 animals a year, maybe? No, or 10,000, even if you killed 100,000, right? But what happens is the females band together in like groups of 20 or so, and they pick a male. The male does not pick the females. And they will only pick a male who has a nice, big, beautiful set of antlers. And when you kill all the ones that have pretty antlers and all the rest are what they call hockey sticks because they're just kind of stubs, then females are not attracted and they don't mate.
Wow. So
that's the way the way that the biologists feel like hunting impacted it was that we kill the desirable males.
Right.
And take them out of the picture.
God.
So anyway, hence the name Trophy Labrador. You could catch a trophy brook trout and you can kill a trophy caribou.
Wow. Yeah, I just want to highlight, because, and I see you said hunting. I mean, we have about probably half of the people listening now are hunters as well, lots of diversity. And we did an episode with Hal Herring with backcountry hunters and anglers just recently. And it was a great episode. He talked about all the challenges and, these types of stories, even going back to the American buffalo, right? Back in the U.S., the history of that whole thing. But, I think it was a positive. It's always hard when you hear these things because it sounds really negative, but I still feel like even the people that know, there's some stuff we can do. And so I like to keep it on a positive note, but that is a crazy story. We'll have to follow up on that a little bit and see if maybe that changes down the line. But yeah, so the Trophy Lodge. So talk about that. So the caribou are not in the picture now, but these brook trout are. What are these trophy? Describe them a little bit. How big is a trophy brook trout?
Well, a trophy brook trout, is a 4-pound trout. Most people will tell you a 5-pound brook trout, but a 4-pound trout is a remarkable animal. You just don't find them anywhere. Down here in New England and in a lot of places, there's always the occasional big fish, but if you catch a 4-pound brook trout, it's a remarkable fish.
4-pound, like over 20 inch, like inch wise, roughly what would that be?
A 4-pounder would probably be 20, 21 inches by 10 or 11 inches in girth.
Yeah. Big fat. Yep.
Right. And, can I just drop back for just a second?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where I was telling you, when I got involved in the lodge, there was on our river, which is called Woods River, which is quote unquote too far away from town to have a viable business. There was 2 cabins by a man and his son named Bruce Wolfrey, and Bruce built the cabins in 1991, and they had guests in 91, 2, and 3. They had a total of 17 guests, 12 of whom were the same 4 guys that came up for 3 years. And in 94, his son got killed. His son was a pilot and had a plane, and his son got killed. He got hit by a snowplow. And so Bruce lost all of his interest in the place. And that's what we bought. We bought his lease that he had already gotten from Crown Lands. That's like our national forest in Canada, called Crown Lands. Yep. And so we bought it from him. So that's the way we started. So we renovated those 2 cabins and we built like 8 more. We built a dining lodge and bigger camps and guides camps and a boathouse and manager's camp and all that stuff. So we did all that in 98 and 99. So that's kind of when we got started. So it was a camp there before we did. And I told you there was 4 fellows from the Boston area where I was from, and that had been up there. And one year they went up for a month and they just explored. Labrador requires you to hire a guide, but I don't think they even had a guide. They just flew them in there and gave them the enough gas for the motor on the canoes, and that's what they did. But I had a lot of lunches with those guys, trying to pick their brains about all the places they went so I could figure out where some of the good places to go fishing were. But anyway, they came up to 3 Rivers after we changed it over to, and we had a really good week up there kind of reminiscing. And they didn't like the improvements we made, but who would? They've got these 3 years of great memories of living in a little cabin in the middle of nowhere all by themselves.
Oh, right.
Right. So
you made it a little bit bigger and better for more people, right? That's and nicer. Yeah,
exactly.
A quick break for a word from our sponsor, Smitty's Fly Box, delivering monthly flies, fly materials, and accessories each month with their Smitty's subscription fly box. If you need a unique fly selection for a new water you're fishing, or if you want to get started fly tying the easy way, Smitty's has you covered. They will find out where you're fishing and supply you with a custom fly assortment. And Smitty's has been producing high-quality flies and materials for over 30 years, and you may not realize it, but Smitty's is connected to Round Rocks, who is the sole supporter to Sportsman's Warehouse and has tied and supplied millions of flies over the years. I was at Sportsman's this week and picked up a couple of dozen flies, some chubby, small, and large dry flies, some terrestrial patterns. The quality was exceptional. That's one of my struggles, is the dry flies. So I love looking at these little guys, from small little tiny flies that I can barely see with my eyesight to the big ones. And these are the same people who are delivering and tying these flies to your door with Smitty's Fly Box. It's a great time right now to get stocked up for the season. You can head over to smittysflybox.com right now to take a look at their selection of flies and monthly boxes right now. Let Smitty's take the guesswork out of choosing fly materials and patterns right now. This is also an easy way to support this podcast and a small business who has been producing high-quality flies for many years. Check them out right now. That's Smitty's, SMITTYS, smittysflybox.com. Okay, back to the show. Well, talk about, so if people are coming up there, let's say somebody's listening now and they're thinking about, Labrador is definitely on the bucket list for many people.
Right.
And so what does it look like putting this trip together? Is it your typical kind of Alaska lodge where you fly and you spend like 6 days sort of thing, or do you do like a diverse kind of hybrid sort of approach there?
No, that's it. We do week-long trips. 7 days in camp, 6 days of fishing because there's a changeover day. And we go from the last 2 weeks in June through the end of August. So we have 10 weeks of summer. That's it. On the other side of that, the ice is on the lakes and the float planes can't land. So we have, that we have a work week or maybe sometimes 2 weeks before guests get there. So we try to get in early June. We usually able to get in by June 7th. One year we didn't get in until June 24th, and our first guest came on June 21st. But we had to cancel that week, obviously, and filter them in through the rest of the year. But anyway, so that's it's a limited season. You just you get yourself to a little town called Wabush, Labrador. Air Canada and Provincial Airlines fly there, and you get there and spend the night, and we pick you up at the hotel and the next morning and fly you in on a float plane into camp. It's 150 miles from Wabush into our camp, and you get off the plane and you spend a week in nice cabins, 2-person cabins with full amenities and all that, and you go out fishing with a guide every day, and you catch a brook trout. It's just a really great thing. But like I said, the front porch and after dinner in the sitting room with drinks and the stories that we pry out of each other and share, that's kind of the big deal. But the nice thing is, and the fishing is, everyone will know about fishing. And John Gierach has been a great ambassador for us in his stories. Well, I guess I should, before I tell you about that, I should tell you about John.
Yeah.
This is one of the best stories.
Okay, good.
That I got. Chris and I read a book by Jim Babb, who was the editor of Gray's Sporting Journal. And if you haven't interviewed him on a podcast, then you're going to ask me for a recommendation.
Oh, good.
Jim is one of the wittiest, brightest men on the face of the earth, and you would absolutely adore.
Nice.
Anyway, he was born in East Tennessee, close to where my brother and I were, and his life kind of followed mine. Went to the service. I went to college. He only finished 9th grade, but he didn't need to go to school, as you find out. Maybe I hope you'll find out. Anyway, he wound up in Maine, and I wound up in Massachusetts. So I just out of the blue, he had a new book out called Cross Currents, fly fishing book. And I read that and saw that we kind of had parallel lives. So I just dropped him an email. I said, hey, I got a new fly fishing lodge in Labrador. Would you like to come up, and fish it with us? I know you like brook trout from reading your book. And he answered me right away and said, that'd be great. If you can do it early in the season, I'd love to come up. So I called my brother and said, hey, Jim's going to come up, and at the time he was writing articles for Gray's Sporting Journal as well as editing most of the rest of it. So we said, this is the way to get the word out, right? And so 2 weeks later, I get an email from Jim, and it says, any chance I can bring a couple of friends of mine? And I said, oh, Lord. I called my brother. I said, you give them an inch and they take a mile.
Right.
I said, and Chris said, yeah, well, just call them back and let them down easy. Just tell them, we're booked up and,
Right.
So I called him back and he answered right away. And I said, hi, Jim, it's Robin. The Three Rivers. I said, so what's the deal with these 2 people you want to bring? He said, listen, I've worked with these people a long time. I've never fished with them. I'd really like to. And I said, yeah. He said, yes, John Gierach and AK Best.
Oh, wow. And AK too.
Right. And I just about, what my pants. So
yeah, you're on it.
Exactly. So I called my brother back. I said, you won't believe it. But anyway, so that's how it all got started. So John is actually a second cousin removed of Jim and has ancestry back in East Tennessee too. And so the week that I had the fellow that I was on the banks of the Tellico River catching my first trout with. He and another friend of his from East Tennessee, 2 of my brothers, which grew up in East Tennessee, Jim, who grew up in East Tennessee, and John. Anyway, we had East Tennessee week, the first week in July in 2001.
2001.
Exactly. And so that's the first time I got to meet John and Jim and AK, and we got along great. And, John just kept coming back. Every other year, he really enjoys brook trout, and he really likes the culture there, the people. He enjoyed the Newfoundlanders, and the young French guides that we had. And I think that one of the reasons that he calls it his second home is because I never sold a trip on his back. I never said, come fish with John Gierach, only $49.50 or, none of that. Nobody ever knew he was going to be in camp until they got on the float plane together.
Oh, that's great.
Right.
Yeah.
And I really respected his privacy deeply.
Yeah.
And I think he respected that a lot about us too. So
yeah,
not an ambassador.
That's really cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just as a good example, this show right here, right? This is what's cool about all this is that John has been on our podcast a couple times, and he's doesn't get bigger, but I didn't know about you guys until he came on, and he really gave you rave reviews, and I was just like, man, I mean, I listened to people who are at John's level, and I just had to get you on, so here we are.
Exactly. Well, it's and we have a great friendship. Our friendship, I see him at the Denver fly fishing show. He stays in the booth when he's not signing books, and we have a meal or two together. Used to have a smoke together, but unfortunately I quit. Oh,
you quit? And he didn't though, did he?
No, but I miss it more than I could ever say.
I know.
I get to go to heaven when I still.
How long has it been? Robin, how long has it been since you quit the smoke? I'm curious about this. How many years?
I've dead quit a long time ago, but the last time I actually bumped one was 3 years ago.
3 years ago. Okay. Yeah. I'm saying, I mean, I didn't smoke, but I chewed Copenhagen for like my whole life. And it was so hard. It's still, it's been 20. Well, no, it hasn't been 20 years. It's been like 13 years, but it's still one of those things. The tobacco just is like, man, I could have one right now and it'd be great. It's just it's that thing. Tobacco just is tough. But again, right. You got kids and other things you got to think about. So.
Exactly. If there's a heaven, cigarettes are 25 cents a pack and they're good for you.
Right. Yeah, that's what they told you back in the day, right?
When I was in college at Emory University in Atlanta, we ran up to North Carolina and bought cigarettes for $2.10 a carton.
Oh my God!
So it was 21 cents a pack.
21 cents, and now they're whatever 10x that or something.
Yeah. I think they're $15 here in Vermont.
$15. Yeah, that's it.
Even more in Canada.
Right. Yeah, Canada. So, okay. Well, I think we have, this John Gierach, obviously he's John Gierach, but, and he comes up there for, brook trout is one thing. I'm trying to get a feel for this because, the brook trout that you have down in the lower 48, some of them are small up in these brook trout, high mountain streams, things like that. And they're really ferocious they take the bug. Is that kind of the same thing with these fish up there, these giant fish?
No, John, I got into John by saying that he was a good ambassador for us, but also, he's in a lot of his books, he said, these really big brook trout, if you catch 2 or 3 of them a day, that's a really good day, and it is. We have had clients who've caught 30 or 40 big brook trout in a day. And we've had a lot of people. Well, what I tell guests at our orientation when they come in is the 6 days of fishing here, you're going to have 2 slow days and 2 days, really good days, and 2 days you'll never forget. And that's kind of the deal because any river's the same. There's going to be conditions where fish just aren't eating, they just aren't eating for whatever reason. And most people that come up, even it doesn't really matter how good of a fisherman you are. You're going to be able to catch fish even if you're a rank beginner because you don't need to be a really good caster. A lot of the rivers you can just strip line out and let it float down with a streamer on the end of it and strip it back and catch fish.
Oh, wow.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the better fisherman you are, and it really not in terms of casting. The casting is important. It is important. But what's really important is your stealth and knowing how to read the water and your persistence and your willingness to change flies, because if you don't want to change flies, you shouldn't come to Labrador, because when they're on something, that's what they're on, and you don't know what it is. If they're rising to blue-winged olives, that, or if you see a swarm of sucker minnows, which are kind of like mud green minnows that are 2 to 3 inches long, you can put on an olive woolly bugger. That's easy. But oftentimes they're just into something totally different, so you have to be willing to try. And the guides are really good. Another one of my smart ass sayings is people will ask me how many fish a good fisherman can expect to catch in a day. And I usually say not as many as a beginner, because a beginner will listen to his guide and you won't. So
yeah, that's right.
It's the guides are very helpful, and if you're headstrong and think you know it better, then you're probably not going to be as successful. But yeah, everyone's going to catch fish 5 and 6 pounds. Almost everyone catch fish is that big. And, you'll have days where, might catch 1 or 2 fish, or, some days that, you can really get good and catch 8 or 10 nice big fish,
Yeah.
And you have feeder creeks if you want to go catch a bunch of small fish and just, have, like you said, in the high mountain streams where they jump on the first thing that hits the water. We have those feeder streams too that you can do some of that. All right. So
yeah, gotcha. So yeah, for the big ones, it's kind of like a mix. It's like it could be like Atlantic salmon or steelhead fishing, where you get a few big fish in maybe a day, but then
exactly
you could have this epic day. I remember John telling a story. I'll put a link in the show notes to that podcast we did with him, the last one. He told this really funny story. I can't remember the question I asked him, but it was something like, he was talking about the flies, like at your lodge, and he said he had been there for the 6 days, 7 days, and he had a really good day. And he was talking about how good it felt that he had the fly that worked that day. I think maybe the guide was telling the story, and it was like John's fly. Uh-huh. And it was really cool. It was just so John Gierach, because he was explaining it, and he was just said he felt really good that he was giving this guy and his son the fly that worked, right, even though he didn't let anybody know that he felt real good. That's kind of the thing. Like, he found one fly that worked. Is that kind of how it looks on a day? You might find that one fly that just, boom, that's the fly, and then it works, day after day sort of thing.
It is exactly that. I mean, one year we had a polar shrimp was like the dynamite fly, and every pink fly piece of flying tying material in the whole lodge disappeared quickly as everyone was tying polar shrimp, and they've never seen a shrimp. There's not even freshwater shrimp.
Right. So what was that imitating? Like an egg or something like that?
I have no idea, but it worked the whole year. One year, John Havlicek, the famous Boston Celtic, and he and his son were fishing, and I had just caught a fish that coughed up about a 3 or 4 inch white fish, which just looked like a silver minnow, real silver white minnow. So I tied up these big mylar tubing flies that were stiff and unarticulated, and they looked terrible, but they worked great. They worked fantastic. And John and his son fished with the same fly all week. It wasn't like the same type of fly. It was the same one fly. It was so indestructible. You couldn't tear it up. And I met a fly tyer at one of the shows, and I had him tie 10 dozen of them for me. And the next year, we could not catch a brook trout on it. They wouldn't even touch it. We caught pike on them. So and anything big and on the surface, Labrador, everyone wants to come up and fish mice patterns.
Yeah.
And mice, there's not any mice, but they're voles. And they do eat voles, but anything big on the surface of the water, skated, like, a big wolf pattern skated, or unweighted muddler, or zonkers, not zonkers, gurglers. Sorry.
Oh, gurglers, yeah.
Yeah, those foam things. Those are great.
Yep. Oh, wow. So you can get a lot of surface, not only just dry fly like a mayfly, but you can just do all sorts of crazy stuff.
Exactly. And then, one day you'll pull into like our Cedar Rapids, and over on a side eddy, they're rising to blue wing, size 17, 18 blue-winged olives, and, they're sipping flies under the alder bushes. So it's a challenge every day to figure out what's going on. But, you can, like I said, if you change flies and listen to the guide, you're going to do really well.
Yeah. Yeah. And what are the streams like there? I've seen some photos and things like that. Are there lots of boulders? Describe the water you're fishing. Is that typical boulders, pool drops, things like that?
Right. It's freestone rivers. The Labrador is relatively flat, so there's not a big grade. Like all the rapids, would be considered class 1 rapids if you were coming down it in a raft. But, the rocks are erratic. They move every winter with all the ice. And so the wading is not easy. You need a wading staff and, good boots. And, but the good news is you really don't have to get out waist high or something and wade. You can just sort of stay along the edge and cast to almost every, reach every part of most every stream.
You're painting a really cool picture. So I already see what's separating it. Alaska, and again, we're not comparing this to Alaska, but it's not always you're going to find a lot of bugs, mayflies, things like that. Is that something up there where it's just every once in a while, or are you throughout the summer seeing hatches of mayflies, caddisflies, stoneflies, stuff like that?
Well, there are a lot of hatches. Yes, there are a lot of hatches. Unfortunately, they're not real dependable, right?
Oh.
And they happen a lot when we're not on the water. The big problem with our whole program, and one that I've thought about changing all the 26 years I was up there, was that, we have breakfast at 7 and people eat and go get their waders on and get in the plane or get on a boat and they go somewhere and they're fishing by 9 or 9:30. And then, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they start wrapping it all up. Not only because, usually they're tired, they're worn out and they head back, or they get back to the lodge at 5 or 5:30 and they have a shower and drinks and, we have dinner at 7 and all the good times to fish, we're not on the water. The best times to fish are from, 5 in the morning to 9 o'clock, and then again from 5 in the evening until dark.
Oh, right. And why the early morning up there? Is that just because why would that be up there
Just
early?
because that's when the hatches are coming off.
Oh, the hatches are there. Yeah.
And also because the light is low. And when the light is low, their fish are much more eager to rise to food, to be moving around and feeding. When the sun gets high overhead, we have pike that can swallow a 5-pound brook trout in one swallow.
Oh, wow.
We have lake trout that can do the same thing.
In the streams?
Yes, well, right at the mouth of the streams, right where they're, right where you're cruising around if you're a brook trout looking for food, And we have eagles and ospreys, and if you look closely, I don't think you can catch a fish in our whole river system that doesn't have talon marks on its back.
Oh, wow.
Or maybe pike, jaw.
Sure.
Tooth
scrapes.
Right, exactly. They're usually healed. They're not gaping wounds. You occasionally.
No, that's really cool.
But one time I was going down with my daughter and the guide. We were taking the canoe down through what we call our second rapids, which is kind of broad and shallow. And I saw, it's very known for what we call a foam pool. It's a pool where kind of a back eddy and where the foam all collects. And when the foam collects there, also the insects collected that are floating.
Foam is home, right?
Exactly. But the water was really low. This was late in August. We were going down to close our outpost camp. And we saw, when we went around the corner, we could see down to the rapids. Kevin, the guide, said to me, "Look, there's 2 guys fishing down there." And we looked down and looked like 2 people waded out in the middle of the river fishing. As we got closer, we could see that it wasn't people. It was 2 immature bald eagles. They were fully sized, but they didn't have white heads yet. They don't get that till 3 or 4 years old.
That's right.
And the foam pool was no longer connected to the river. The water was so low, it was just like a little pond. And in that pond, there were 4 brook trout, 2, 3, 4 pounds, with talon marks and blood coming out of their backs. The eagles had taken them out of the river and stored them in the little pool over on the left.
Oh, wow.
For future use. So,
oh my God.
Talking about smart animals,
right.
We had never seen anything like that before, but they take a lot of fish and they, the ospreys a lot of times will hit a fish and it's hard, an eagle will take a fish usually on the fly when they're close to the surface, but an osprey hits water and stays on the water. And once it's grabbed the fish, it tries to take off. So it's got the water pulling against it as well as the weight of the fish. And it's really hard. They got great big, long, broad wings. And to watch them try to take off is just an amazing thing when they've got a fish. But if it's too big, if it's a 5-pound, 6-pound fish, they just let it go because they can't get off.
Oh, right.
Right. But anyway.
God, that's so cool. This is amazing. The picture that you're painting here just with the eagles, and I have heard about that with birds of prey that in some of these high mountain lakes around the country, they grab them and then drop them in these places where there are no fish. You know what I mean? So they're smart.
Yep, exactly.
Back here with Daniel from Northern Rockies Adventures, and he's going to share some more Northern BC fishing tips. How you doing, Daniel?
Doing great, and today we're talking trout. Pretty excited.
Yeah, it's always good to talk trout talk. So today's going to be, the headline is the trifecta of trout. So let's talk about what the trifecta is up to Northern BC, where we're going to be heading to meet you.
So I really like what everyone thinks of trout, rainbow trout. That's just kind of the main species everyone's fishing up here. But what's interesting is we have 2 other species. So we have the bull trout, which was actually it's a landlocked Dolly Varden. And then we have the lake trout, which is actually in the char family, and probably the most underappreciated of the two here, or of the three. It's such a variety of trout. They all have unique angling opportunities and experiences. It's pretty fun to target all of them.
If anybody wants to follow up further on this, we'll send them out to nradventures.com/wetflyswing. And we also have an episode coming up with you December 20th, 2023. This will be episode 540, where we're going to talk everything trout and just everything you have going up there in Northern Rockies. So until then, Daniel, thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Dave. Pleasure.
So this brook trout thing is amazing. I mean, everything you're talking about is just trip of a lifetime, sort of thing. But you also have pike and other species. Are people actually going up there, and are you fishing for pike too?
Oh, yes, we do. Pike are always fun. Like on an afternoon, like I said, when you quit at 4:00 and you're on your way back, put a wire pike guard, steel tippet on, and throw a great big streamer on, and just pull into a cove and splash it up against the shore in the water lilies, and watch these things just come screaming from 30 feet away and make a big wake and just explode on your fly. And then they make this incredible run and run you right out to your backing. And then they roll over and pretend
that's
like dead.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And are you guys doing this? And you mentioned the canoes. Are you doing a little floating and walk and wade fishing?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. The canoes, we get around in the canoes. They're big freighter canoes with the 15 Honda horse on the back of them.
Oh, wow.
And so we run the smaller lakes, and we run up and down the rapids, and the guides would just walk you right down the rapids. A lot of our demographic are 70, even 80-year-old people who really can't wade. And unfortunately, there's a lot of 40 and 50-year-old people who aren't in very good shape to wade, and they'll just back the canoe right down the rapids, and then let you fish right out of the canoe or get out on a flat rock and fish the area around that, and then travel down a little further. So, you can wade or you can stay in the boat, either one, and still fish the rapids. But the pike are in the flat water, and usually in the coves, and usually in a cove where a little stream feeds into the lake, because that's where they'll find a lot of fish activity to eat. And then we've also got lake trout, we've got lake trout and, 35, 36 pounds lake trout.
Wow.
So they can eat a lot of brook trout too.
Right. And they're kind of they're kind of down deeper. Are they harder to catch?
They're down deep. When you first get there, they're up in the mouth of the rapids, and some are even up in the rapids. We've so many times we know we've got the world record brook trout. We finally caught one bigger than 14 pounds, and it turns out to be a lake trout that was up sipping mayflies in the middle of one of the rapids. So they'll come up in the spring, and then again when the water cools in late in August, they'll come back up and onto the shallow shoals in the lake, and you can just on the boat, cast up on the shoals, and bring a fly back and really hammer the lake trout.
Gotcha.
And they are really powerful. They're not like the pike at all. I think they fight better than the brook trout. Maybe they're not quite as the stamina the brook trout has, but pretty close.
Pretty close. But they're bigger for the most part. What is the largest? So what is the brook trout? What's the largest? What's the world record on brook?
World record's 14 and a half pounds. Caught by a doctor in the Nipigon River in 1916, I think.
Yep.
Right.
So that's good. So what's the largest fish you guys have seen up there?
Our biggest fish that we've caught is a little over 11 pounds. In 26 years, we've caught 3 fish 10 pounds or better. Right. We caught a load of 8 and 9s. But only 3 10.
The 10s.
Right. Double digits beggar. We caught, one 10-6, one 10-8, and one 11-3. Everything's got to be perfect for a trout to get that big. They have to be lucky with the predators, and they have to be just, in the right place at the right time, because there's a lot of predation. That's why they're big. If you're not big, you're just gone, right? So they stay in the small feeder streams, or nursery creeks is what we call them, until they get to be, pound and a half, 2 pounds. And once they get that big, they can venture out well, I should tell you real quick, the life of a Labrador brook trout. They live to be 10 years up in Labrador. That's the max. In Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, and New England, they'll only live to be 5 years. And they really don't know quite why. But they live to be, so what they do is when they're 3 years old, they're a pound and a half. When they're 4 years old, they're 4 pounds. Because when they get to be a pound and a half, they stop eating all the stuff that's growing on rocks and they start eating other fish. And that's when they put on their massive weight gain is in their 4th year. So they go from a pound and a half, 2 pounds up to 4 pounds in 1 year. And then after that, they add about a pound a year if everything's healthy. If, unless they have like wicked, crazy weather, or whatever. But so a 10-pound fish is a 10-year-old fish. So that's basically the way it works. So you're catching, we tagged fish, and 2009, 10, and 11, we tagged fish with a biologist. They had been on my case for years to come do research on our river because they kept hearing good things about it, and were hearing things about other rivers that weren't faring as well as ours, and the trout were on the decline big time. And I tried to remind them that the reason was because those other rivers had lodges on them that let you kill fish, and we didn't. But they wanted to do more research than that. Anyway, we tagged 1,100 fish in the first 3 weeks of 3 consecutive years. And so we learned an awful lot about brook trout from being able to catch those tag fish in different places and different sizes and so forth and so on. We found how much travel, which is a lot.
How did you tag those fish? Like what sort of tag? And did they like track them with radio telemetry or something like that?
No, none of that. It's just a little tag that goes right behind their dorsal fin, goes in their dorsal fin right at the back side of it.
Oh, just like a plastic flag sticking out of its body. Like
the tags on your shirt when you buy it, that kind of thing.
Right.
And it's just a little, like a little thin cylindrical thing with a number on it. And, that we had purple, yellow, and orange for each year. And so we would catch them and we record all that. The guides had a great time. I mean, they really enjoyed it. And we caught the last one in 2016. Was it 2016? So that we caught. And it was a disappointment because it was tagged the last year in 2011. So it was tagged 5 years later. And when we tagged it, it was 3 pounds. And when we caught it, it was only 4 pounds. So it didn't fare well, which was weird. In 5 years, that only gained a pound. So it was mixing it in with the wrong fish. Feeding stations are hierarchical. The bigger fish get the better stations, and they run your ass out.
Right.
So there's a lot of the social life of brook trout are as complex as they are of humans. Right.
Yeah, that's great. No, I love that you went into that. So you basically tracked these fish and found that. What it was that other than that, anything else you learned from that 5 years or so of tagging?
Yes, big time. It was 3 years we tagged, right?
Oh, 3.
Yeah. We learned a lesson. We tagged a fish one time at Second Rapids. At Fifth Rapids. A day later, we caught it at Second Rapids, which was almost 12 miles upriver. 2 days after that, we caught it back at Fifth Rapids again. So the question comes up, it begs the question, as they say, why would a fish travel 12 miles upstream one day, spend 2 days there, and go back, 2 days later?
Yeah.
It's got to be food source. That's the only answer.
Yeah.
It's not spawning season. We're in the spring, so they're not anything to do with spawning. Yep. And we tag fish that we caught 40, 50 miles upstream from where we tagged them. It's just a lot of movement. The biggest thing, the two big things that we learned was oftentimes you'll see big 5, 6, 7 pound fish sitting under in a foot of water under the alders, just stationary. And you can throw anything at them and they will not move toward any fly. And you push them with the end of your fly rod and they just come right back to where they are.
Right.
I never could figure out what the hell was going on with that. And this young woman who was the biologist said they just ran the lake the night before. He said when they run the lakes, the lakes are, anywhere from 5 to 15 miles long between the rapids.
Gotcha.
And they run them at night, and they run them full speed, or else they get bitten, they get eaten.
Oh, right.
And so when they come up, they're just full of lactic acid. So they have to pull over in a sheltered area where a big pike can't get to them and just let all the lactic acid dissipate for a day or 2 or 3. And then they go back to their normal, habits. But that's what it is. So that was really enlightening for me, because I just kept hearing these stories. What are they just lying under the alders for?
Yeah.
But the biggest thing was sometimes the guides, when we would have slow times, right? Sometimes the guides would come back and say, I think at Vizina Rapids, which is one of our biggest rapids, there's only like 20 fish that live there. We just keep catching them over and over and over again. And then maybe at first rapids, there's only 12 fish. And at second rapids, there's 20 more. They just thought there was just a very limited number of fish, and we just kept hammering them over and over again. So the good news is in 2012, I put it to them, I want to know every fish that we tagged. Remember, we tagged 1,100 fish.
Yep.
And in 2012, in the first 3 weeks, when that was the year we stopped tagging, only 1 out of 24 fish that we caught had a tag on it.
Amazing.
Right. Which gave the guides really true belief in the incredible quality of the fishery in the Woods River. And that was important because, if you don't believe in what you're doing, you're not going to do it as well. And to me, that would be something that a guest may not, they might like the stories about, running a long way or whatever, traveling. But to me, it was the confidence that put into the guides that was the greatest thing.
Right. The fact that these were basically their fresh fish moving around all the time, coming in from other areas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there's a lot of fish out there. So.
A lot of fish. So these fish, and like you said, they would be feeding at one point in the river, and then they would make their migration during the night up into the lake to feed there.
Right.
And then they would again travel at night, and they had to go fast to avoid predators. Exactly. That's why.
Exactly.
God, that's great. That's probably similar to, I'm sure, other areas around the country. We've talked about a lot of streamers and fish, different species, but doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting because. This is brook trout. I haven't talked about giant brook trout. What, for that area up there, have you seen changes in population? I mean, we've talked about this down in Maine where we've had some guests come on that said, that they're really thinking brook trout are really pessimistic, thinking like, hey, they're going away because of all the climate change. Have you seen any changes in that in recent years?
I have. And this past year, we had a heat wave unlike any that we've had in the 26 years I've been there. The first and second week of July, it was 90 degrees, and the water warms up quickly because all the water comes out of the sky. We don't have aquifers. It filters through peat bogs, and it comes into the rivers and streams and lakes stained with tannins. So it's kind of tea-colored, right, the water. And that tea-colored water really absorbs solar energy rapidly. So we can see a rise of 5 to 8 degrees in one sunny day on the lake. Not quite that much on the rivers, but on the lake, that's how much it can go up. So when it's 90 degrees for 2 weeks in a row, we had one creek that we measured, the temperature was 80 degrees.
Oh, wow.
Now, brook trout cannot live when it's 72 degrees. The water will not hold enough oxygen to keep them alive. What we had to do for these 2 weeks was we moved breakfast up an hour earlier. We got people right out the door. We went out and fished in the morning, but when the water they were fishing hit 65 degrees, we quit and we took them to catch for pike and whitefish and lake trout on the flat water. And of course, all the guests, who are to the person great sportsmen, all understood that completely. And matter of fact, encouraged that we do that. And so they didn't feel like it ruined their trip, and they were able to catch some really nice brook trout, and quite a few of them were returning guests, so they knew what the deal was there anyway. But it was that's the kind of thing that it worries me a little.
Yeah.
How much is this going to happen in the future?
We
had hot days before a day or two, but nothing like 2 weeks in a row.
Nothing like 2 weeks, yeah. And that's kind of like the hoot owl regulations I think they implement in Montana and some of the West.
Right.
Where you see the same things, and it's pretty much, Yeah, it's just what you have to do.
Yeah.
But it sounds like, and like you said earlier, I mean, the early mornings, late evenings are some of the best times anyways, so it probably wasn't that big of a deal.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And, like all the Atlantic salmon rivers, if they get to a certain temperature, they close them right away. So there's a lot of people paying more attention to those kind of rivers than they are like remote brook trout rivers. So you kind of have to do it yourself. I mean,
Gotcha.
We've been stewards of this river. We've worked really, really hard. I mean, I heard in one of your podcasts, I believe it was one of yours, people talking about the grip and grins are like out of fashion now, and people don't do that anymore.
Yep.
We try not to do it. I mean, everyone wants to get a picture of the fish with them. I mean, you just can't turn them down when people paying thousands of dollars to go to these places. It's hard. But what we do is we give our guests the net, and the guide takes the camera, right? And they keep them in the water. And when everything's all set, they just push their hand up under the net, just lift it right in front of their face and back down in the water. So
that's it.
3 to 4 seconds out of the water, and that's it.
Yeah, that's great.
Right? We try to do that, but we still, I still get grip and grins. Some of the guides just, it's really hard for them to just put their foot down and say, no, we're not going to do that to these people who are so excited to catch fish. And if, like I said, paid a dear price in both their time and their assets to come fish. But we try to very best. The whole point is that, we've really kept the fishery in good shape, and it has not failed to produce in the 26 years I've been there. Right.
And are there any, you had talked about the biologists. I mean, so is there a need for like management? Are there people up there looking at this river, the rivers in Labrador, saying, how are we doing? Or is it pretty much,
No.
Are you guys just kind of monitoring things?
No, it's pretty much on us. Like I said, on the coast, the Atlantic salmon rivers, they are, but not the brook trout rivers. We try to just get, a river designated fly fishing only. That's not going to happen. Catch and release, that's not going to happen.
It's not. Why do you think that won't happen?
It's just because it's a subsistence culture. People up there, live on what they catch and what they shoot. And they don't really much anymore, but that's the culture, and they're not going to deny, the citizens of the residents of Newfoundland and Labrador, they're not going to deny them a chance to go put a brook trout in the freezer. And we could close them, close the rivers to, anything other than, fly fishing, but we've tried, so many of us outfitters have made the effort, and it goes nowhere. So,
you have tried, right?
But the good news is, as far as our work we're concerned, you got to have a plane to come fish our river. So we don't get any residents coming in. We don't have anybody fishing our waters that's not one of our guests.
Gotcha. Okay.
People that are closer to town do. Some of the outfitters, you can get there by Sea-Doos or on four-wheelers. And so they've, the one that I went to originally has suffered dearly because people can get there on four-wheelers.
Oh, right.
And a power line went close by, and they just ride up the power line and then jump over into the river system. And of course, they just whack every fish they catch.
Oh man, that's too bad. God. Yeah, that's it. I mean, so you're in one of those places just remote enough where people can't do that, and you have to have literally a plane to get there.
You need a float plane to get there, right?
Yeah. When people get there, arrive at the lodge, what does that look like? Once they get out the next morning, you said they get going. Do they hop in a plane from there and fly to a river and then hop in a canoe, or are people able to walk?
Well, we have an outpost. You can't walk anywhere and fish.
Okay.
You can. We're on a peninsula. The wind blows, so it keeps the bugs, in the alders. That's why the camps are out on a peninsula. But yeah, we go in boats and plane from the lodge in the morning. We'll have a couple of 3 flyouts, and the other people will get in a boat and go to the areas, the rivers that flow into the main river. They'll go those by boat and further places in the plane, and we have boats all up and down the river. We've got a lot of freighter canoes stashed here and there. So, the plane will fly and drop you off in a jump in a boat, and then you go to the different fishing holes in a boat once you run the long distance in the plane. We have an outpost camp, which is 35 miles downriver, and it's a 4-hour trip in a canoe and a 10-minute trip in a plane. So most people would spend a night there and the day on either side, fishing the middle part of the river, which is really productive rapids down there. So that's one of the flyouts. It really comes in handy.
Amazing.
Plane there, right?
Right. So on that outpost, remind us again. So you take describe that again. How you do it. This is where your camp. Or the people camp? Can they camp too on the way out there, like in a tent?
No. The outpost camp is a full amenity cabin that has 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, a full bathroom, and a dining area. So we take 4 guests at a time and 2 guides, and they go down like early in the morning. They get up and go down, fish all day. We fish 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th rapids from our outpost camp. So they'll go downstream or upstream and fish that day and spend the night there, get up the next day and fish the opposite way they went the day before. And at the end of the day, the plane comes and picks them up and brings them back for dinner.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of the way the outpost camp works. Now, if you want to stay 2 nights there, you can, or 3 nights, whatever you want. And some people don't want to spend the night at all there.
Yeah.
Not many, but some don't.
Okay.
We don't do any tents anymore. We used to do that. Remember back when we first started this talk, I talked about the culture changing, and people used to come up and they really wanted to go do that stuff out in tents, go up. We did a lot of trips where we just send 2 people in, a guide and a tent and provisions up a river, one of our feeder rivers, the 3 rivers, and they would be gone for 2, 3, 4 days. And they'd come back and just say, I caught more fish this trip than a person has a right to catch in a lifetime. But nobody, and I mean, nobody wants to do that anymore. Not people who can afford to come there.
You're right.
See, the people that would enjoy that Labrador the most probably don't have the resources to come.
Yeah, right.
It's now. So start a savings account.
That's right.
But it's really worth going. It's on people's bucket list, like you said at the top too. And it's there for a reason. It's really a remarkable wilderness. Most people come away with fishing, the fish being the 3rd or 4th best memories. I mean, the fact that they went into this kind of a true wilderness, and I believe it or not, it's not something that consciously happens, but they make it a week and they survive it. It's like something I can't quite describe well enough. I'm actually writing a book about all the stories from Labrador, and it's something that I've struggled with trying to put this. It's something that you can feel and see in people's eyes around the dinner table, but there is a deep satisfaction in having come up to, a true wilderness. I mean, I'm talking about, like I said, you don't see anybody else, and there's danger. There's danger there.
Yeah. What are the I mean, there is obviously dangerous stuff can happen. I mean, right. What is the biggest danger up there?
Well, that any kind of medical facilities are a long ways away.
Oh, right.
Boat plane can't fly at night. So if something happens at night, you're out of luck. There's not really any animals. I mean, there's bears, but the bears, we've only had 2 close encounters with a black bear in the 26 years we've been there. And that was these stupid 4-year-old male bears that are horny and not old enough to attract a mate.
Oh, right.
And they just get pissed off, just like humans.
Sure.
And like a 10-year-old, anyway.
Yeah, right.
But it's really that, a slip and a fall. And just a sense how old everything is, how ancient it is a sense of being a place that, humans don't usually go. So
yeah, it's hard to get to. Yeah, no, it is.
Right. That's one of the features. And, like I said, it's just the camaraderie that they have there and the like-minded people, and not to brag, but
yeah,
I don't mean to sound cruel when I say this, but I've learned to read between the lines of emails really well over 26 years.
Oh, right.
Kind of know kind of people who would really enjoy being there and people who wouldn't. So
right.
I'm fortunate enough that we're book solid for the foreseeable future, and I don't have to worry about filling spaces.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all. What is, just so we know kind of roughly, what would a trip up there cost if you did have openings in the next few years?
It's the actual trip itself is $7,200 plus a 15% tax. It's like $8,500.
Yeah, $8,500.
And then you got probably another $3,000 or $4,000 in travel and gratuities and probably buying some gear or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's going to cost $10,000 or $12,000 to come up there for a week.
Yep. That's it. Perfect. No, and I think that's like you said, yeah, maybe some people, and we've done some episodes all over the place. We've had episodes like the Dirtbag, the Bum Diary, people who,
right.
Literally are doing these trips to New Zealand on no money.
Right. Exactly.
But there's also people listening now that have plenty of money, and they're just like your clients, and this is something. In fact, I want to give a shout out. We're going to take it out here pretty quick, Robin. But I want to give a quick shout out to this is our listener shout out segment. Dick Sargent is one of those guys. He's traveling all around. He listens to all the podcasts, and he emails me and lets me know, like, hey, I'm thinking about this, And so this is going to be an episode I think he will love to hear about, because he's done Alaska. He's done a lot of these places. I'm not sure if he's done this, but I just want to say this is presented by the Virginia Fly Fishing and Wine Festival. Bo is doing some great stuff out there. We're going to be heading out to his place this next year. And I wanted to check with you. So, as far as, your shows, it sounds like, is that something you don't do anymore, going out to any of these shows? I know there's the fly fishing shows. You mentioned Denver. Do you guys still do that, or people?
I did Bo's show the first 2 years, I think. The first 2 years in Virginia. Right. Yeah. And I don't go back to it just because I don't even know why. I should. And I see him at the shows, and I see him around, and I know Bo well. And
yeah, you know Bo. Cool.
And I really should. But no, I do the Marlboro show in Massachusetts.
Yep.
Because that's where I lived for all the time. I'm close in Vermont. And I do the New Jersey show at the fly fishing show. And then I go out to the Denver show. And right, I've done them in Chicago and in Detroit. Detroit has a great show with the Trout Unlimited chapter, puts on a super show there. And then there's one in Minneapolis that I used to do too. I don't do too many shows anymore. I do them just because, I keep my ear to the track of the business to see old friends. And, I don't really need to book anymore. Fortunately, that was, believe me, I don't take it for granted at all, because I worked hard for 15 years.
Sure.
Struggling. I mean, and
put the time in.
But finally that we built a brand, and, but it takes a long time. And
I hear you.
Anyway,
That's it. Yeah, the shows are fun. I enjoy the shows just for, like you said, the same thing, seeing people, meeting new people, things like that. And we're going to do a quick little rapid fire to get out of here, Robin. So, and you still have a few minutes to just wrap this up real quick?
Sure.
Okay, good. We'll do this really quick and we'll hop out of here. So, we didn't cover a ton on the fishing. There's all sorts of stuff, there where they can meet with, talk to you. And we might even, down the line, not sure, maybe the new owners, we might talk to them about getting them on to go more into the tips and tricks. But what would be the rod? Somebody's coming up there. Are people mostly bringing their own gear? And what is kind of the rod weight that you recommend?
6, 7, and 8 weight rods. 6 and 7s for 6 for the smaller creeks and the quiet days and dry fly fishing, a 7 and 8 for the bigger water, windy days, big streamers. But 6, 7, or 8, any of those will do.
Okay. And are you guys using, is this mostly like dry fly or dry lines?
Yes, we mostly use all floating line, but a sink tip does come in handy, especially if you're a nymph fisherman. If you're good, with a lot of the new nymphing techniques, those are deadly. I mean, people who can fish a nymph well catch more fish than anybody else, not everywhere else in the world, but in our rivers too.
Nymphs. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And for me, I'm always thinking everybody's different, but I would, getting a big fish would be obviously cool, but just like you said, with the streamers, maybe the top water stuff, I mean, that would be epic to be able to, right? Exactly. Is that what a lot of people think? Yeah.
That's what most people fish, and they're successful. But like I said, if you're a killer nymph fisherman, you're going to do really well.
Yeah. And what about a flyer too? Like you mentioned that you never know, but so now we're in kind of November, so we've already had the season. What was the big fly this last season, or was there a few?
Was a white gurgler.
Oh, the gurgler.
Right. White and purple gurgler.
Yeah. Right.
Right. They just can't seem to.
And what are you imitating? What are those fish thinks going on when you're stripping a gurgler?
Some kind of a small mammal struggling on the surface of the water, or maybe a big fly, maybe. dragonfly, or I don't know, but it's crazy. I think it's mostly mice. I've never seen lemmings and voles. There's supposedly a lemming hatch like every 7 years.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Where there's like so many of them, they all fall in the water. But I've never seen that at all. I've never seen a whole,
right.
Whatever the right word.
Yeah, population, a whole.
Right. Explosion of lemmings. But I hear there is one, and I know that they love them because most people, when people come up and they walk in the dining room the first time, they say, I want to point to a big fish mounted on the wall. They said, I want to catch one of those on a mouse. So everyone has got the micing bug coming to Labrador, right?
There is something about the micing. Yeah. Okay. And what about somebody listening now? Maybe they're going to be doing a trip with you in 2026 or something like that. Is there, to learn more about this, like how to do it and things like that, tips and tricks? Is there a resource you recommend, or where do you send people to get them ready for this?
Well, that's a good question. I usually send them emails with a lot of the information, but we do have stories that I can point them to online.
Okay.
To tell basically, I wish I could say that they could buy my book, but it's not even close to being ready.
Well, the cool thing about this is this will be out for years. So yeah, it eventually will be, and people can check it out. What is there a title?
I've got a working title. Where's Labrador? ?
Oh yeah.
That's my working title.
Right.
That's the book. The book, just real quick, is an answering the 7 or 8 major questions that I've listened to for 26 years, but not answering them like I just answered your how big a rod to take. Answering all those questions by telling stories.
Yeah.
So it's a book full of stories that I've lived, heard while being up there.
Yeah. Kind of like we did today, right, on this podcast. We kind of didn't get into but the stories are what it's all about, really, at the end of the day.
Exactly. And people can glean what they will from the stories. And I think it's not hard to find out. It's not hard to find the answers to your questions in the stories.
Yeah, the stories, yeah. And like you said, it's not, if they go up to your area, it's not going to be that hard to catch a fish. They're probably going to catch some fish.
Yes, they're going to catch fish.
Nice. Okay. All right, Robin. Well, I think we'll leave it there for this one, and we will send everybody out to trophylabrador.com if they have questions to Three River Lodge. And I just want to thank you for coming on today and sharing all your all the stories and knowledge and wisdom here, and definitely appreciate your time today.
It was a pleasure to meet you on the phone and to talk about Labrador.
That is a wrap. You can grab all of the show notes at wetflyswing.com. And please follow us on Instagram and share this episode out with someone you love. Please send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com, if you have any feedback or want us to put together an episode on this podcast for you. Check in anytime. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and would love to meet up with you on the water. We have new fly fishing schools going all year long and all around the country. So if you want to connect, let's do it right now. All right, time to get out of here. I hope you have a great evening. I hope you have a great morning or great afternoon wherever in the world you are. And I appreciate you for stopping by and checking out the show today. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.